drastically change and evolve, as we've seen over time, in many aspects such as organics, production, technology, quantity consumed, quality of goods, and how this affects our everyday lives. So what does the future look like?
The future in GMOs. Genetically modified organisms are going to be one of the only possible ways to feed the growing population within the next 50 years. The idea of GMOs is ideal for a number of reasons. They can be grown in harsher environments such as deserts and other things because of the fact that they're genetically modified. Also, this helps because of the fact that they can be grown to a point where they don't need pesticides anymore because they're grown naturally resistant to pests and other insects and such. And because of the lack of using pesticides and insecticides, they're overall healthier for people to eat because of that. And they're definitely more affordable to grow because of the fact that they're genetically modified, and also because they're able to yield an even greater amount of harvest every year or so. The importance of switching to them. Without a switch to GMOs within the next 60 years or so, the population will continue to grow without a means to meet this increasing demand for food. According to the UN State of the World Population Statistic taken back in 2001, approximately 800 million people live on the verge of starvation, and an even larger 1.2 billion subsisted on about $1 a day. And considering that, it's very safe to assume that the population has grown even more, and this number has probably gone up even more in just the last 15 years. It gives us even more of a cause for us to switch to GMOs within the next 60 years or so. And by switching to GMOs within the next few decades, it is safe to say that world hunger will soon become a thing of the past, and we will soon be able to feed everyone on the planet. Now Josh will continue to talk about the importance of switching to GMOs.
So Bert just explained the importance of GMOs, and I'm going to kind of relate that importance to population and the population growth over time. So first, I'll give you an idea of the world's population right now. So if you go to www.census.gov, there's actually like a clock, a population clock for the US and the world. When I went on, I believe it was 2 days ago, it was at around 7.2 billion for the world. I wanted to use that because it's constantly moving and it seems like it's the most current. So if the world's population continues to grow at the current rate that it is, it'll take only about 50 years for the population to double to close to 12 billion people on the planet. So as you can see, the population has been growing and everything points to it continuing to grow. So is our current food supply supporting the population? Well, here's some, this was a statistic put out by the United Nations in 2001. Both these statistics relate to 2001. So Bert mentioned these, and it's in 2001, 800 million people live on the verge of starvation, so could die from lack of resources and food any day. Additionally, 1.2 billion people live on $1 a day or less. So the most common cause for this like starvation and malnourishment is lack of resources, unfairly distributing resources to parts of the world that are less fortunate, and areas even that have the resources but are stricken with poverty. Lots of those areas see a lack of resources. So GMOs for the win. I believe that if we increased GMO food production in countries that are already producing, and we spread the use of GMO food production to countries that aren't currently using it, it would allow areas with lack of resources to use these methods to basically harvest foods that they wouldn't naturally normally be able to do so. Also, like Bert stated, this is basically the most effective way for our world's food supply to keep up with the growing population. So in 2012, these were the 4 biggest GMO crops. And I just wanted to show this to the class to show you how, like, obviously these are things that are in, most, things at the store, that you buy on a regular basis when you go grocery shopping are going to contain one of these 4 crops, and these are the biggest crops as far as GMO production. And now we're going to go into a little bit about technology.
All right, so as previously stated, almost 1 billion people are are starving, and so hopefully technology can play a big part into drastically decreasing the rate of starvation. One of the first things that's being talked about is vertical farming, and vertical farming is like a greenhouse, like skyscraper that you would dissimulate like downtown in like New York City, LA, Chicago, and other areas around the world. It's just being talked about now, but within the next 50 years, it'll probably be a normal day-to-day thing. The advantages of this are you can control your environment, so no pests, no flooding, no drought, and no more deforestation since horizontal, it's vertical going on. The next invention that they're working on is something that's like a smart refrigerator, so it'll plan your meals based off of the expiration dates of the food that are in your fridge. Alternatives to today's food choices. So currently it takes about 1,900 gallons of water, 7 pounds of grain, and a half pound of fertilizer just to feed 1 pound of beef. So it's a lot of input for a little output, and the goal is the opposite. And that's what scientists are doing in San Francisco. They're working on an egg that isn't produced by a chicken, but has the nutrients of an egg. So who knows where we can go with that to other food sources like beef and grains. The most interesting idea I found is that 3D printing your own food, and it's not really known, but NASA is using it for their space travel. They're 3D printing just basic food for their astronauts, and could be used like in an everyday situation in like hospitals where you could tailor to like the needs of like diet. So let's say you have like hypertension, you could lower the sodium content, but you could still eat the food that you like. So hopefully this can be us in 2065, and technology can drastically bring us out of starvation. And now Jack is going to talk about with regard to religion.
So there are a lot of religions that don't eat certain foods. Seventh-day Adventists are generally vegetarian. Judaism has kosher or fit foods. They don't eat pork or shellfish. Islam has halal, which is permitted food, or haram, which is prohibited foods. A lot of religions don't eat pork. Pork is a pretty unclean meat, according to many religions, due to pigs being scavengers. They are host to a lot of parasites that their bodies can't get rid of. Have you ever heard of the term sweating like a pig? Well, pigs don't actually have sweat glands, so they can't rid their body of the toxins that they consume. For that and for many other reasons, people are turning to alternative sources for nutrition. Entomophagy is one of those. Entomophagy is described as the consumption of eating bugs or insects. With food security becoming a more constant global issue, there are places around the world already practicing this, Africa, Mexico, and even some places in the US. They're turning to mealworms, grasshoppers, caterpillars as sources of protein. These specific insects can be mass collected and aren't prone to common diseases that we see in pigs and cows, etc. They're also, because of their size, they're also easily imported and exported.
As we know, export and import are international trade between two countries for exchange the product or service. However, the export demand for fresh food are increased from 1990 until today, and United States export to Japan are raising from 332 million in 1990 to 383 million in 1991. So there is different kind of vegetables sold. For example, the frozen and the canned vegetables are in the soul too. So in addition, fresh food export increased from 30% into 45% over 1990. Also, export of the fresh food will be higher in the price by the year 2065.
So, as Iman just gave the example of us exporting to Japan, this is a real life example. I actually used to work at the Port of Stockton 2 years ago in California, and this is the U.S. actually exporting rice to Japan. Each one of those sacks is 10,000 pounds of rice. And I thought it was kind of interesting, like all semester we learn about, Asia and the rice fields and cultivating it, and now we ship it to them. So I found it to be interesting.
On the other hand, import food are a significant factor of U.S. Economy. U.S. government established import and export safety system for safety food and environmental. They control the export and import food system for any health problem by establishing a new test system for safety import and export.
So, with population growth and the growing demand for food security, your dinner plate could consist of 3D meats and vegetables, grasshoppers and caterpillars, or purely GMOs. By 2065, the types of variations of food and nutrients that we consume will look significantly different than they do today. Looking to the future, we as a united planet will be required to evolve and